For 3 long years, the grand white mansion on the hill had been unusually quiet. It looked perfect from the outside, tall pillars, polished marble steps, shining glass windows, but anyone who walked inside felt something missing. There was no laughter, no running footsteps, no cheerful voice of a child. Only silence lived there. Elias, the billionaire's only son, had once been the heart of the home. Before the accident, he laughed loudly, loved exploring the garden, and always asked endless questions. But that joy disappeared the day he lost someone very close to him. The sadness in his heart grew so heavy that he stopped smiling completely. He became quiet, still, and distant, almost as if he had locked his emotions away. His mother tried everything. She hired the best therapists, teachers, and doctors. She bought every kind of toy, train sets, puzzles, painting kits, musical instruments, hoping something would bring back even a small spark. But nothing worked. Elias would sit by his window, staring outside without expression, as if the world no longer belonged to him. The staff in the mansion cared deeply for him, but even they did not know what to do. The maids whispered softly when they saw him pass by, his small hands resting on the arms of his wheelchair, his eyes empty of excitement. The guards watched him with respect, moving quietly so they would not disturb him. Everyone felt the weight of the silence he carried. His mother often cried in private. She never let Elias see her tears, but every night she held one picture in her hands, Elias smiling brightly, his arms wrapped around her. She prayed that one day he would look like that again. She prayed for a miracle, even if she did not know where it could come from. The mansion's large windows faced the main garden, where Elias spent most of his afternoons. The sun would fall softly across his face as he sat in his wheelchair, but he barely noticed it. Instead, he spent hours watching the world in silence. Birds flew past, leaves danced with the wind, cars moved down the hill, but he did not react to anything. Not even a blink of curiosity. But on one particular morning, something unusual happened. Elias was sitting by the window as usual, his hands resting still on his lap. A gentle breeze moved the curtains, and sunlight touched the edge of his face. The maid standing behind him sighed quietly, thinking it would be another quiet day. She had grown used to seeing him without a smile. Everyone had. Then, out of nowhere, a small shadow appeared near the stairs outside. At first, the maid thought it must be a delivery boy or someone who had lost their way. But when she looked closer, she noticed a tiny barefoot boy standing on the marble steps. His clothes were torn, his hair messy, and his feet covered in dust. Yet his face held something special, a bright, warm, fearless smile. His name was Milo, though nobody in the mansion knew that yet. He was a homeless child who wandered through neighborhoods looking for anything that could fill his empty stomach. But this morning, he was not searching for food. He had followed a faint tune playing from one of the mansion's windows. Music always made him feel alive, even if his life had been full of hardships. Milo walked closer to the steps, completely unaware that the mansion belonged to one of the richest families in the city. To him, it was just a big house with nice music. He stepped onto the marble and tilted his head like a curious bird. Then, without thinking too much, he started moving his feet to the rhythm he heard. It started as a small shuffle. Then a spin. Then a jump. Milo began dancing, freely, wildly, beautifully, the way only a child with a strong heart could. He had watched street performers before, copying their steps whenever he got the chance. Now he danced with all that he had, smiling brightly as if the whole world was cheering for him. Inside the mansion, Elias watched with a blank expression at first. His head tilted slightly as he tried to understand what he was seeing. This barefoot boy, dancing. Right in front of his home. The maid gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. She had never seen anything make Elias turn his head so quickly. Milo, still dancing, slipped a little, caught himself with a laugh, and continued even more confidently. His joy was contagious, even though he did not know anyone was watching. Then something happened, something none of them expected. Elias's lips moved. Not a word. Not a sound. Just a tiny curve. A small smile, the first in 3 long years. The maid's eyes filled with tears. She stepped back, overwhelmed. She wanted to call his mother, but her legs froze from shock. Elias continued staring at Milo, and slowly, very slowly, his smile grew wider. His chest tightened with a strange warmth he had almost forgotten. Joy. Hope. Life. Something inside him woke up that morning. And all it took was a tiny homeless boy dancing outside his window. Milo did not know he had changed anything. He had no idea that inside the tall white mansion, a boy who had forgotten how to smile was watching him with wide eyes. He simply kept dancing because the music felt good, and dancing made him forget how hungry he was. The morning air was cool against his skin, and even though his shirt had holes and his pants were torn from walking long distances, his spirit stayed bright. He spun one more time, almost slipping on the smooth marble, and burst into a laugh. That laugh reached Elias like a soft knock on a locked door. For years that door had stayed shut, but something about this carefree boy began to push it open. Inside, the maid wiped her eyes quickly and rushed to find Elias's mother, her voice shaking with excitement. She whispered, "Madam, please come quickly, it is Elias, he is smiling." Elias's mother froze as if her heart had been struck by lightning. She had waited so long to hear those words that for a moment she thought the maid was imagining things. But the look on the maid's face told her it was real. Without even straightening her clothes, she rushed toward the window room, her footsteps echoing sharply across the hall. When she reached the doorway, she saw it, Elias with a soft smile on his face, his eyes full of something alive. She covered her mouth with trembling hands, afraid that even breathing too loudly might break the moment. Outside, Milo was still dancing, adding silly moves just to entertain himself. He kicked his feet, waved his hands, shook his head with exaggerated energy, and every time he stumbled, he laughed even louder. He was used to the streets where people rarely looked at him with kindness, but he had learned that joy was the one thing no one could steal from him. His dance was his expression, his escape, his hidden strength. He did not know that one small act from him was touching a life he had never met. Elias leaned closer to the window, his fingers gripping the armrest of his wheelchair. He had not moved that quickly in years. His mother struggled to hold back tears as she watched him. His breathing changed slightly, like he was trying to understand a forgotten feeling. It took him a moment before a soft giggle escaped his lips. It was small, but it filled the room with warmth. His mother stepped forward without meaning to, the sound of her emotion catching in her throat. The maid behind her whispered a thank you prayer under her breath. Milo finally noticed the figure in the window. He froze mid-step, surprised. His eyes grew wide when he realized someone was watching him, someone who looked like he came from a completely different world. For a brief second, Milo wondered if he was in trouble. But then he saw Elias's smile. Not a forced one, not a polite one, but a real smile. That changed everything inside Milo. Very slowly, he lifted his hand and waved at the boy in the window. It was a hesitant, gentle wave, like he was asking permission to stay. Elias blinked, then raised his own hand weakly in return. It was the slowest, softest movement, but it was enough to send a shock of hope through his mother. Her eyes filled again, and she reached for the door handle. She knew this moment could not be wasted. She had to go outside, had to let this interaction continue, because something magical was happening, something no therapist or specialist had been able to create in 3 painful years. As she stepped onto the open doorway, her breath caught when she saw Milo up close. He was so tiny, his bare feet dirty from long journeys, his clothes worn thin. But his eyes were bright, full of innocence and fearlessness at the same time. Milo instantly stepped back, unsure if she would scold him or chase him away. He lowered his head like he had learned to do whenever adults approached him on the streets. But Elias's mother did not shout. Her voice came out soft, almost breaking. "Hello, it is all right. You are not in trouble." Her gentle tone made Milo look up again. He glanced at Elias in the window, then back at her. She saw how thin he was, how tired yet hopeful his expression looked. Something inside her softened even more. She asked him softly, "Were you dancing for my son?" Milo shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am. I was just dancing because the music was nice." Elias watched everything from behind the window, his smile still there, faint but alive. He could not hear every word, but he understood something important: the dancing boy was kind. He had brought light into a corner of Elias's heart that had been dark for too long. Milo turned to go, thinking he should leave before he caused any trouble. But Elias suddenly lifted his hand higher, tapping softly on the window glass as if saying, "Wait." His mother noticed and stepped forward quickly. "Would you like to come back tomorrow?" she asked Milo gently. The boy's eyes lit up, surprised by the invitation. He nodded shyly. And just like that, two worlds that never should have met, began to move toward each other. Morning came slowly to the mansion, painting the walls with soft golden light. Elias sat by his window again, but this time something inside him felt different. For the first time in 3 years, he woke up with a tiny spark of curiosity. He kept thinking about the barefoot boy who danced without fear, the boy who made him smile when no one else could. His hands rested on the arms of his wheelchair, but they were not as still as before. They trembled slightly with a feeling he had forgotten: excitement. The maid, who brought his breakfast quietly every day, noticed the change right away. His eyes were not empty anymore. They were waiting for something. Outside, the mansion workers whispered about the previous day, amazed that a street boy had done what experts could not. No one knew if he would return, but everyone hoped he would. Even the guards who usually stayed serious found themselves looking toward the gates more often than usual. Something had shifted in the air, something gentle and warm. Then, just as the sun rose a little higher, a small figure appeared at the bottom of the marble steps. Milo had returned. His clothes were still torn, his feet still dusty, but his smile was just as bright as yesterday. He carried nothing but a small plastic bottle of water someone on the street had given him. When he reached the steps, he looked around shyly, unsure if he was allowed to be there again. For a moment, he almost turned back, thinking maybe it was a mistake. But then he saw the silhouette behind the large window, the quiet boy watching him again. Elias leaned forward when he saw Milo. His heart thumped in his chest, a feeling so new he hardly recognized it. Without thinking, he lifted his hand to the glass, pressing his palm gently against it. The sun reflected off the window, making Elias's face glow softly. Milo's eyes widened, a smile spreading naturally across his face. He stepped closer and raised his hand too, pressing it against the air as if trying to touch Elias's through the glass. Inside the room, Elias's mother stood silently in the doorway, her heart swelling as she watched the silent exchange. She had spent years hoping her son would feel connected to the world again, and here was a child who had done it without a single lesson, without any plan, just pure innocence. Milo suddenly began moving his feet, making small dance steps, testing the ground, warming up like a performer before an audience. He did not want to dance too wildly right away. He wanted to see Elias's reaction. Elias's lips parted slightly, his breath catching as he watched. Then Milo spun once, clapped his hands, and hopped in place with a playful bounce. Elias blinked, and then, the corners of his mouth lifted again. A soft giggle escaped him. It was quiet, like a whisper, but enough to fill the room with life again. Encouraged, Milo danced harder. He twirled, jumped, and added funny little moves he had learned from watching street performers. Twice he tripped but caught himself with a laugh, and each time Elias giggled louder. Elias's mother covered her mouth to hide her tears, not wanting to interrupt them. She had not seen her son laugh this freely since he was very small. The mansion staff gathered discreetly around the edges of the garden, pretending to work but secretly watching the miracle unfold. A gardener with soil on his hands paused with his shovel. The maid stood by the railing, trying not to cry. Even the guards softened their posture, smiling without realizing it. Milo danced like he belonged there, even though he came from the complete opposite world. After a few minutes, Elias lifted his hand again and tapped on the window gently. Milo froze, sensing that Elias wanted something. Elias pointed downward and then gestured with his hand, a motion his mother understood immediately. He wanted to go outside. His mother rushed to him, kneeling beside his wheelchair. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" she whispered. Elias nodded quickly, his eyes shining with an eagerness she had not seen in years. Her heart pounded with joy and fear at the same time. She signaled the butler, who hurried to prepare everything. As the door slowly opened, Milo stepped back nervously. He wondered if he had done something wrong. But then he saw Elias being wheeled out gently by his mother. The moment Elias came into the sunlight, Milo's face lit up. Elias clapped softly, encouraging him to continue dancing. And Milo did. He danced with more energy, adding silly expressions and playful footwork that made Elias laugh out loud, clear, bright laughter that echoed across the courtyard. Elias's mother stood behind him, her hands shaking with overwhelming gratitude. The mansion, which had been silent for so long, now rang with happiness because of two boys who had nothing in common, except the ability to heal each other. While Milo danced, something inside Elias awakened fully: hope, friendship, and the feeling that maybe the world still had beauty worth noticing. Milo slowed down finally, out of breath, his chest rising and falling quickly. Elias clapped again, this time with more excitement, his smile shining brightly. Milo grinned back, proud that he had made someone so silent come alive again. That morning marked the beginning of something neither boy understood yet, a bond that would change both their lives forever. The moment Elias came outside, the atmosphere of the entire mansion shifted. It was as if a new light had entered the spacious courtyard, warming not only the marble floors but everyone's hearts. Elias had not stepped out willingly in years. Most days, he sat by the window, distant from everything and everyone. But today, he leaned forward in his wheelchair with a spark in his eyes, watching Milo with anticipation. His mother stood behind him, her hands lightly resting on the handles, afraid to breathe too loudly in case the fragile joy vanished. Milo, who had never imagined performing in front of such a grand house, felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. But when he saw Elias smile, all his fear dissolved. The smile meant more to him than any coin anyone had ever tossed his way on the street. So, he started dancing again, this time with more energy. He kicked his feet high, spun around until he got dizzy, snapped his fingers, and even made a silly face that immediately sent Elias into a fit of laughter. The laughter echoed across the courtyard, bouncing off the tall pillars and windows like a long-lost melody returning to its home. Maids and workers paused their tasks without meaning to. One maid held a tray of fresh towels but forgot to move. A gardener dropped his watering can onto the grass as he watched the two boys. A guard near the gate lowered his walkie-talkie and exchanged a stunned look with another guard. They all stood still for a few seconds, as if afraid the moment would disappear if they moved too quickly. But when they realized Elias's laughter was real, their faces softened into smiles of relief and happiness. Elias clapped his hands together, something he had not done in so long that the staff felt tears prickling behind their eyes. His mother watched her son with trembling lips, unable to stop the tears that ran down her cheek. She did not try to hide them. She felt as if she were witnessing a miracle. After years of pain, grief, and failed attempts, something as simple as a little boy dancing had opened her son's heart again. Milo noticed her tears and paused awkwardly, unsure if he had done something wrong. He stepped back slowly, chewing on his lower lip. "Did I make him upset?" he asked nervously. Elias's mother shook her head quickly, wiping her tears before they fell again. "No," she whispered, her voice soft with emotion. "You made him happy." Very happy. Milo smiled with shy pride, rubbing the back of his neck. He didn't get compliments often, especially not from adults. To be told he brought happiness to someone, especially someone from such a different world, felt unreal. It filled a small, empty space inside him that had been cold for so long. Elias made a small gesture with his hand, signaling for Milo to continue. The joy in his eyes made it clear that he never wanted the moment to end. Milo nodded enthusiastically and jumped back into a dance. He added new moves, ones he had never tried before. He stomped rhythmically, then tried to do a handstand, failing after 1 second and landing on his back. Elias burst into uncontrollable laughter, bending forward slightly in his chair as the sound escaped him like a waterfall. The staff laughed too, unable to resist the moment. For a brief while, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just two boys, one dancing with pure joy, the other laughing like he had rediscovered life. The mansion, once heavy with grief, now vibrated with pure, warm energy. Elias's mother crouched beside her son and gently brushed his hair back. "Do you like him?" she whispered. Elias nodded eagerly, his smile still shining. He tried to lift his hand toward Milo as if wanting to reach him. His mother's heart melted completely. She had not seen her son make such a clear gesture of wanting someone's presence since before the accident. Milo finished his dance with a dramatic pose, panting heavily as he placed his hands on his knees. Elias clapped harder this time, excitement glowing from his entire face. Milo looked up shyly and giggled. "I can show you more tomorrow, if you want," he said softly. Elias responded by tapping the side of his wheelchair and pointing toward Milo, a gesture even Milo could understand. Suddenly, one of the maids approached Milo with a warm smile and offered him a cold glass of juice. Milo stared at it carefully. He wanted to take it, but he hesitated, unsure if this kindness was real or if it would vanish the moment he touched it. Elias's mother knelt down in front of him. "It's okay," she said gently. "This is for you." Milo accepted the glass with both hands, drinking quickly. It was the sweetest thing he had tasted in days. His eyes glowed with gratitude. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am." "You're welcome," she said softly. "You can come anytime. This house is open for you." Milo's mouth parted in disbelief. A house like this? Open for him? He looked at Elias, who was still smiling, still laughing softly under his breath. And that's when Milo knew, something bigger than just dancing had begun between them. Something strong. Something real. The next few days brought a routine no one in the mansion had ever expected. Every morning, Milo returned to the marble steps, barefoot, hungry, tired, but smiling with the same unshakable brightness. And every morning, Elias waited for him by the window before being taken outside. It became the one thing he looked forward to. His mother noticed the change in him immediately. He ate more, slept better, and asked to be taken outdoors without hesitation. The sadness that had once covered him like a heavy blanket slowly lifted, replaced with curiosity and the beginnings of hope. Each day felt like a small victory, not only for him but for everyone in the mansion who had watched him suffer quietly for years. Milo, though young and small, carried a strength that did not come from money or comfort. It came from surviving long nights on cold sidewalks, from finding food wherever he could, from being kind even when the world wasn't kind to him. He was the kind of child who had learned to smile even with an empty stomach. And now, standing in the mansion's garden, he found himself in a place that felt unreal. He had never stepped foot inside a home this big. Sometimes, while dancing, he would glance around nervously, wondering if someone would suddenly tell him he didn't belong there. But every time he looked at Elias's joyful face, his fear disappeared. On the fourth morning, after another dance that left Elias laughing so hard his eyes watered, Elias's mother walked slowly toward Milo. She had watched him carefully over the last few days, noticing how thin he was, how fragile his little arms looked, and how hungry he always seemed even after drinking juice or eating small snacks offered by the staff. She approached him gently, not wanting to frighten him, and asked quietly, "Would you like to come inside for breakfast?" Milo stepped back immediately, shaking his head. "No, ma'am. I shouldn't. This is your place. I'm not supposed to go inside rich houses." His voice was soft, uncertain. He was used to being shooed away from front porches, store entrances, and gates. He did not want to lose the one safe place he had found. But Elias stretched his hand toward him, his fingers trembling in the air. His eyes pleaded for Milo not to leave, not to stay outside like a stranger. Milo looked at the small reaching hand, then at the mother. Facing both kindness and fear at once, his voice cracked. "Are you sure it's okay?" Elias's mother nodded with a warm smile. "You made my son smile. You brought him back to us. Of course it's okay." With hesitant steps, Milo followed them inside. The mansion's interior was like stepping into another world. His bare feet pressed against cool marble, and he felt a mix of awe and discomfort. The paintings on the walls, the chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling, the quiet hum of air conditioning, it was all things he had never known. Yet the thing that struck him the most was the warmth of the people inside. They did not stare at him like he was dirt. They smiled. They looked grateful. It confused him, but it comforted him too. Elias's mother led them to a small sitting room near the kitchen. She didn't want to overwhelm Milo by taking him somewhere fancy. Instead, she chose a cozy space with soft chairs and a view of the garden. She served Milo a warm breakfast, eggs, toast, and fruit. Milo stared at the plate like it was a dream. He had eaten many things in his life: cold leftovers from dumpsters, dry bread someone tossed at him, fruit fallen from a roadside stall, but he had never eaten a meal made for him with care. He whispered a thank you before taking small, careful bites. Elias watched him closely, fascinated by every move. He wanted to talk to Milo, but words still felt heavy for him. Instead, he reached out, touching Milo's wrist gently. Milo looked up and smiled softly, understanding without needing words. The connection between them grew stronger in that simple moment. Over the next week, their friendship deepened. Milo taught Elias simple dance steps, showing him slow hand movements and small claps he could manage even while sitting in his wheelchair. Elias tried each move with determination, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, but always smiling. The staff often paused in doorways just to watch the miracle, a billionaire's son who had once forgotten joy now laughing, clapping, and learning from a homeless child who had nothing but heart. In return, Elias shared things with Milo too: drawing books, little toys, and simple board games. Milo loved everything, not because they were expensive but because they came from someone who wanted him there. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen, valued, and safe. Elias's mother noticed how quickly their bond grew. She saw the light returning to her son's eyes, saw his hands becoming stronger from clapping and reaching, saw his shoulders relax when Milo sat beside him. The mansion, which once felt like a large empty shell, now felt alive again. But she also noticed something else. Milo always left before sunset. He always refused to take extra food, always avoided questions about where he lived. He hid his pain behind smiles. And that troubled her deeply. She knew there were parts of Milo's world he wasn't ready to share yet. But she also knew that one day, he would need help, the kind of help only a family could give. For now, she let the boys continue building something rare and beautiful, a friendship strong enough to change both their lives. As days turned into weeks, Milo became a familiar part of the mansion, almost like a gentle breeze that arrived every morning. Each sunrise brought him to Elias's side, and each sunset pulled him back into the harsh world he came from. Elias's mother watched him carefully, noticing how he never accepted more than what he needed: a small meal, a glass of juice, or a clean shirt the staff offered kindly. He refused anything expensive or luxurious, always saying softly, "I don't want to cause trouble." But the truth was different. Milo simply did not believe he deserved such comfort. Life had taught him to expect nothing, to survive with the bare minimum. Yet inside the mansion, for the first time, he felt seen and valued. That scared him and comforted him at the same time. One evening, after a day full of laughter and dancing, Elias's mother noticed Milo walking toward the gate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the garden, and Milo's tiny figure looked even smaller under the warm orange light. She followed quietly until she reached the corner of the courtyard. "Milo," she called gently. Milo turned, startled, holding a tiny piece of bread he had saved for later. She walked closer and sat on the low steps beside him. "Do you live far from here?" she asked in a soft tone. Milo hesitated. He had avoided this question for days. He lowered his gaze to his bare feet. "Not far," he whispered. "Just under the old bridge near the market." Her heart tightened painfully. She had suspected as much, but hearing it from him broke something inside her. The idea of this small child sleeping alone on cold cement while her son rested in a warm room shook her to her core. Later that night, she could not sleep. She kept replaying his words in her mind, the tremble in his voice, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he hugged his thin arms as if protecting himself from memories too heavy for a child to carry. She walked quietly to Elias's room and found him fast asleep, curled under a soft blanket, a calm expression on his face. She brushed his hair gently and thought of Milo, perhaps awake, shivering in the dark, listening to distant traffic. Tears pressed against her eyes. She could not bear the contrast. She could not forget the truth she had just learned. The next morning, when Milo arrived, Elias greeted him with more energy than ever. He clapped excitedly, reaching out for Milo's hand the moment he came close. Milo laughed shyly and started dancing right away, as if trying to hide the sadness beneath his smile. But Elias's mother saw it, the tiredness in his eyes, the stiffness in his movements, the slight limp from sleeping on a cold surface. She knew something had to change. After breakfast, she gently placed her hand on Milo's shoulder. "Milo," she said softly, "there's something important I want to talk about." Milo froze, fearing she would tell him not to come back anymore. He swallowed hard. "Am I in trouble, ma'am?" She shook her head quickly. "No, sweetheart. Not at all. You have done nothing wrong." She guided him toward a small garden bench. Elias followed in his wheelchair, watching them carefully. She knelt in front of Milo so her eyes were level with his. "I know where you live," she said quietly. Milo's eyes widened in fear. "I'm sorry," he whispered quickly. "I know I shouldn't sleep there, but I don't have anywhere." She placed her hand on his trembling fingers. "You don't have to explain. I only want to ask you something." Milo looked at her, confused but hopeful. Elias leaned forward, sensing something important. "Milo," she continued, her voice gentle yet firm, "how would you feel if you stayed here with us? Not just for breakfast. Not just to dance. I mean, really stayed." Milo blinked rapidly, unable to understand her words. He whispered, "You mean, like a job?" She shook her head. Elias reached out and held Milo's wrist softly, as he had done before. "No," she whispered. "Like family." Silence wrapped around them. Milo stared at her, trying to make sense of something he had never imagined. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He looked at Elias, who squeezed his wrist gently, smiling with the same bright smile Milo had brought back into his life. Milo's chest tightened with a feeling he had never felt before, being wanted. Truly wanted. He swallowed hard, tears filling his eyes. "But I'm just a street kid," he whispered. "I don't belong here." Elias's mother shook her head firmly and cupped his cheek. "You belong with people who love you. And we do." Milo covered his face with his small hands and cried, soft, shaking sobs he had held in for years. Elias wheeled closer and placed his hand on Milo's shoulder, offering silent comfort. Milo leaned into him, letting himself feel safe for the first time in his life. Elias's mother watched them, tears streaming down her cheeks, knowing this was the moment their lives changed forever. That evening, Milo moved into the mansion, not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as part of the family. A warm bed was prepared for him, clean clothes were folded neatly in the wardrobe, and a soft nightlight glowed beside him as he slept. Elias slept peacefully too, knowing his friend was no longer cold and alone. Two boys from opposite worlds had found each other, healed each other, and built something unbreakable, a bond stronger than fear, pain, or circumstance. And the mansion, once silent for years, now echoed with laughter every single day.